Hi, Steph. Thank you for coming on today and being our guest.
Hi, Allison. Thanks for having me. I'm excited
Yeah,
about this opportunity.
yeah. So we are talking about home maintenance today. Why are we talking about home maintenance? Because this is a podcast about people who buy, sell, or rent homes. So it's a good topic to cover. And I just will say, I think so. If for anybody who's watching this episode, who watches my other episodes, they'll notice that my background is different. Normally, I have my bookshelf with lots of like tchotchkes, and today I am in my dad's wood paneled office, which hasn't been redone since I think the 70s, because I am visiting my parents' home. And I thought it was a really appropriate place for me to be recording this episode because my parents' generation, or maybe it's just my parents and my family, but I feel like inherently knew or learned how to take care of a home. Like when I growing up, the maintenance that needed to be done was just like regularly done, usually by my dad. And if we had issues, it was just due to age of a system or some freak accident, but it wasn't due to a negligence issue of, say, not getting or cleaning your gutters or something like that. So then I went into real estate and I realized that, well, one, let me say, before I went into real estate, I bought a house and realized I have no idea what I'm doing because my dad did everything for me. But then, but then
Yep.
after that,
Same.
most, yeah, most of the people that I sell homes to, they don't really know either. And so I thought this would be a great topic to cover because at the end of the day, when you own a home, especially in this area where they cost so much money, you really want to protect your investment and protect your home. And so that's where we are, how we got to this topic today. So again, so thanks for coming on. And maybe you can kind of start by telling everybody how you're our guest today. Like, why are you? How can you help inform our listeners about this topic?
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me. I actually really do love the topic of maintenance. So I come from the property management world. I'm the senior vice president of Nest DC, and I run our branch of the business called Starling, also, which is our maintenance branch. And so we have in-house maintenance crews. We have obviously vendors that we partner with. We've got a lot of boots on the ground that do turnover work. And so there's a lot that goes into maintaining a home, obviously for the homeowner and for tenants who are living in the space. And so I've done this for about 7 years, and I just really think that it's a special place. A lot of people are scared of the big bad maintenance things that can happen, and I love learning about systems, and I love learning about all of the things that can happen in the home. So that's why I'm here, and I'm happy to chat with you and the listeners about some basic things that can be done to hopefully help inform.
Yeah. So I was saying kind of a minute ago that the reason why we want to do or take care of our home is because we want to protect our investment, which is certainly true. So, protecting our investment we can talk about like monetarily, the resale and home value will stay up if you're taking care of your place. But there are a lot of other reasons why we want to really be paying attention to our regular home maintenance that maybe aren't things we think about immediately. I mean, one, it's a little bit obvious, but it's like the enjoyment of your home. Like if you have, you spend $500,000 on a 1 or 2 bedroom place, $500,000 on a condo, you want it to function well. You want your dishwasher to work. You want your air conditioning, your HVAC to not crap out after only a couple of years or have a major problem. So there's like the enjoyment aspect of it. But one that I think isn't thought about quite as much is health and safety. Like, let's say you let a leak drip for a couple of weeks or months because you don't want to deal with it or you don't think it's a big
Hmm.
deal. Well, water leads to mold. And mold, if you breathe in a lot of mold, you can have issues. And then, of course, that starts to also go towards money because mold remediation is is way more challenging than fixing a leak when it happens within the first couple of days. Or like carpet, if there's like a big rip in a carpet or like it starts to bunch up like old carpet does and you trip and fall and you break your face open, well, now now you've got a different issue. Now you've got a major health issue. So there's so many reasons to just try to stay on top of these things. So hopefully we can give everybody kind of a plan, even maybe a list. Like you and I can on this episode, we'll talk about the different things people can do. put together a list for our listeners, and we can give that to them, if they want to ping us for it after this episode.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of controlling the controllables. And so I think if you can follow a list and at least make sure we're doing the preventative things that can be done, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble and frustration. And then obviously those things are going to come up that you didn't expect, that are just a pain, that we have to deal with. But as long as we can get this list out and kind of chat through that, I think that's a good place to start.
Cool. Well, why don't you get us started then? So, if you're buying a home, you've never owned a home before,
Mhm.
um, kind of where should we start with all of this?
Well, and I speak as someone who I bought a house in 2017 and I immediately had to replace the water heater. I have a new roof that just went on and I just replaced my HVAC system a few months
Oh,
ago. So I
no.
am certainly the one to be talking to about a new owner. We don't want these things to happen. You don't want to walk into that situation.
Mm,
And I did it knowingly, so that's okay. But
okay.
I would say that a general list, if you are with the inspector, you're walking through the house, some things to note. You want to know your location of your electrical panel. You want to know obviously where your HVAC is, and the size of the air filter that HVAC needs. Also, the location. A big one is location of shutoff valves, for an emergency. So, like my shutoff valve to all water is going to be in the basement, and that is labeled. It's big. If there is a massive leak that's happening, I know exactly run to the basement and shut that valve off. That is something that an inspector would likely be able to label for you at that time. You want to know the age of your water heater. These are things that obviously I would have known and prepared for. You want to know your boiler, your HVAC, the service age for those, and what was the last time they were scheduled for routine maintenance. Also, if you have exterior drains, you want to be able to snake those drains to try to keep that water from coming in. DC is known for water intrusion in basements. So make sure that you are taking note of if there has been any water damage in basements previously. And if you're walking into a situation where you might need to do something to fix that. So that would be just a very general checklist that we can share out of things you'd like to know.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this, but just in case you didn't, and I was thinking it, most of this stuff you would learn during a home inspection, which most people would love to get, but in this crazy market, some people are foregoing doing a home inspection. So, that's a different topic that we've covered and we'll probably cover again about different kinds of home inspections and why they're important and which jurisdictions are more important and all that stuff. But these are things that you can definitely get from your home inspector, and as a matter of fact, at least all the home inspectors I work with, after you get that inspection, you get an inspection report, and all of this stuff is there for you. So it's almost like you have a checklist already, hopefully. Hopefully, they're checking all of these things, so you can have the stuff and keep it handy as a first start.
Absolutely. And I feel like if you're like, things that you want to things that you're not comfortable or confident in, we tend to avoid, right? And so it's like really diving into that. It could be 30 pages and really looking at it and understanding your home before you move in would definitely be key.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So after that, so let's pretend that every new buyer does get the home inspection and they know where the shutoff valve is and they know all of this kind of stuff. Where I see the issues most times in like this day and age are that people then don't know what they need to be doing to prevent needing to use that water shut off. Right? Like the
Yeah.
things that they do to make sure that their home is ideally not going to have any issues again due to negligence. So what things should we have people do regularly that they can kind of keep track of?
Awesome. Yeah. So I really love the preventative maintenance topic. We've done a lot at Nest and through a new company that we've launched called Birdwatch, which actually just spells out exactly in a really nice monthly cadence what owners should be doing in their homes. So the list that I have kind of just to check off monthly would be changing your air filters in your HVAC. If there was one tip that I could give to owners, if you don't hear anything else, definitely change your HVAC filter regularly. It will depend on how many people are in your house. It will depend on if you have pets or not. I tend to change mine every 2 or 3 months, but you can buy a pack of them from wherever you shop for your home and label them. So put, October of 2021, November 2021, and then keep them in a closet. And you know that when it comes around to that date, go ahead and change out that air filter. We try to tell tenants to do that, but it's a really nice tip for homeowners. So changing your air filters, check all fixtures for signs of leaking. This is something you can just do routine as you go. Just make sure you're paying attention. Are any faucets leaking? Check underneath your kitchen sink. A lot of times we cram so much under there. And then when we go to take it out, we're like, oh my goodness, I don't know how long this has been leaking for. Pay attention to those things. Check your walls for signs of staining and leaking. Look up to see if that roof is letting any water in, and checking for signs of pests. So obviously in DC, hopefully people don't experience this. I have experienced mice quite often. So I have a regular quarterly warranty work set up with a company to come in and make sure that I'm treating for pests. So that is kind of a monthly checklist just to do as you go. Semi-annually, twice a year, we want to do gutter cleanings. You'll obviously have your yard cleanups. Winterizing is something that you'll hear a lot of, winterizing your house. And so you want to turn off those hose bibs or turn them on in the spring. Checking your drinking water filters and your refrigerator. And a surprising one would be to take out your refrigerator and vacuum the back of your refrigerator. It sounds crazy, but you will be very surprised at how much that is needed to keep the life of your refrigerator going.
You
So
know
taking care of appliances is important.
what's funny is that if you are only listening to this episode and you're not watching me, I'm like either vigorously nodding my head back and forth, agreeing with you, or my eyebrows are raised, being like, "Oh, huh, I didn't even know that one." Well, we'll get to this in a minute,
Oh, I
but
should do
about
that.
how yeah, we'll get to in a minute how I live in a building where we basically had all of these things go wrong because there's been various levels of us not checking these things off of the list as a as a condo building. Ugh. But anyway, okay. So of all of the things, just to go back a minute, you were talking about air filters
Yeah.
being the most important thing. Not that I want to put the fear of God into anybody, but can you tell people why it's so important? Like some of the things that can happen if you aren't regularly changing your air filters?
Well, yeah, I mean, the air filter, your HVAC system is going to be one of the most expensive systems in the house, and so extending the life of that as much as possible is absolutely key for most people. And so I think to change your filter regularly is going to keep the life of that. Obviously, number one, but number two, it can cause leaking, it can cause water to build up, it can overflow in terms of condensation. So you really just want to make sure that that system is getting serviced. You can do it yearly. A lot of our owners do choose to have yearly service. We tend to recommend biannually. So having someone come in the spring and in the fall just to check the system and make sure that it's running well is where we typically start and recommend.
Yeah, yeah, I do twice a year. But
Yeah.
I agree. I see people kind of do it both ways. Okay, so we've talked about monthly, semi-annually, and then every year.
Every year, you want to inspect the exterior of the house. You can look for cracks, staining, pooling water around the perimeter. We tend to, right now, actually, in August is our caulking month. So we've got about 150 properties that owners have signed up to have us proactively go in and caulk showers, sinks, countertops. That will also help preserve the life of the interior. So you want to definitely you can look at doing that. Having your sump pump inspected, your hot water heater inspected, make sure your battery backup is working on your sump pump. If you do have a battery backup on your sump pump, definitely make sure that that is working. Uh, Obviously, we talked about having your HVAC system serviced. Check your fire and smoke detectors. Test your hardwired systems. The fire and safety. For a long time, I would meet with owners and we would go through the whole DCR inspections, which I know is like a whole different topic that I'm sure you've covered with rentals and things in the city. But I would tell people over and over again, make sure you have a fire extinguisher. Make sure you have a fire extinguisher. I didn't have a fire extinguisher, so I made sure I have a fire extinguisher. Make sure you're prepared for that. And so if you're listening to this, make sure you have a fire extinguisher underneath your kitchen sink. But those would
Along
be
with all
things
the
that I
other
would
stuff that you've
definitely
crammed
do
in there.
annually. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay,
And so that, yeah, those
so
are the things that I would look to do annually.
Okay. So something I wanted to comment on with was the caulking. So that I've never told anybody to do that either, and I think that's really a great idea because, well, first of all, one of the okay, so in another episode, Michael, my sometimes guest host, and I talked about how dirty and gross cracking caulk can like be a huge turnoff for buyers.
Mhm.
It so it looks really bad, but also it can just you know if it's preventing water from going somewhere, it obviously can be an issue from that perspective too. So I'm just curious, do you recaulk? Do you completely take the old stuff out and redo it? Or do you just kind of patch it up once a year if people wanna start doing this? Just curious how they would do it.
It depends on how bad it is. I mean, you go in and you do have to dig out the caulk if you're gonna obviously redo it, but
Mhm.
our guys they'll spend probably an hour and a half caulking all the showers and around the toilet base and the line behind the sinks to make sure that water doesn't get anywhere that it shouldn't be.
I mean, I don't even care if we go live with this episode at this point because I feel like this is really educating me. Me and my condo, I'm, like, very excited. I'm gonna go and recaulk after this and, you know, do this all this extra stuff. Okay, but we do have listeners, so let's keep going. So the next point that you and I discussed kind of going over, in this episode is the difference between if you're owning a condo versus if you're owning a house because some of the things that that you've talked about in the list you just gave, they will apply to a building regardless if it's a condo building or if it's a house. But the responsibility of
Yep.
who handles which things changes depending on the type of ownership. So let's talk about that for a little bit just to make things more clear for our listeners.
Yeah, and there are, obviously positives and negatives to both sides. So some people, really want the house and want that individual responsibility and know that they are responsible for everything from landscaping to pests to interior. And then there are other folks who I think decide that they would like to be part of kind of a larger group that's responsible for the whole. But that is something to know if you're when you're going in, obviously, to buy a condo, that you share responsibility for the whole building. And so definitely, I always tell owners that I'm meeting with from a rental standpoint, make sure you read your condo docs before purchasing so you know everything there is to know about that and where your responsibility lies. For the unit owner, you're going to be responsible, and this could vary depending on all condo docs are different, but so it could vary. But unit owners are typically responsible for plumbing in their own unit, your HVAC, your window units, furnaces that are servicing only your unit, drains until they tie to the common line of the building you would be responsible for. Painting, drywall, cabinets, appliances, anything cosmetic in your unit that is definitely going to fall to you. And then in unit pest control would be for your own unit. This is where it can get a little the area can get a little gray. Obviously, the building could be responsible for pest treatment for the whole building. You may want to take extra precaution with your own unit depending on the situation, and your hot water heater, if it's in your own unit, that will depend if the building has a system that services the whole unit, the whole building,
Yeah,
obviously.
I to go to the pest control thing real quick. I have, for better or for worse, had various pest control issues since I've lived in DC for 20 something years. I always suggest to people, I mean, I don't know a condo building in DC that doesn't have some kind of exterior and interior pest
Yeah.
control, but I always recommend that people pay the extra whatever and have that company service inside their units. And I try to make sure that my clients know it's not just about treating your unit, though, really try to make sure everybody in the building is treating in their units if possible, because the thing with pests is they're smart. You know, if you treat your unit and they don't go in there, they'll go into a different unit if it's not treated. So you need the whole building really to be treated for it to be as effective as possible. Um, so, like, that's I think where a lot of the problems come in DC is that people are like, "Oh, it's a new building. We don't need pest control, yet, or we might not because it's made really well. The building was made well, blah, 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 blah." And I'm always like, "I don't care. Start early." And in one of the buildings, the first condo
Yep.
I ever bought actually, um, completely new build, and we have always done pest control since the first month the building was built, and knock on wood, because I still own it, we really haven't had many issues at all. The building's now like 12 years old. And I firmly believe that's why every unit does the treatment, including the exterior and the interior common areas. And that's what works. And no, and I don't care who we're talking
Yeah,
to. Some people might not care about a rip in the carpet or, some of this maintenance stuff, but nobody likes bugs and rodents. So that's my advice with that piece.
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it could be, the buildings, it's not even your building, it's your neighbors who's next to your building. And is that building doing pest control? So yeah, you need everyone on the same page in buildings, but definitely something to look at and encourage folks to do.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so go on. Sorry to cut you off and talk about bugs for 3 minutes.
No, 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 you're fine. And then, yeah, we just kind of talked about the association responsibilities. So your association, your HOA, they're going to be the ones that are going to cover your elevators, interior cleaning, painting in common areas, the hallways, obviously, building systems, your generator, elevator, I said, call box, HVAC, boiler, hot water heaters, your exterior envelope landscaping, building security, access control, and then building pest control, like we mentioned. And so the HOA is going to, and the board are going to make decisions on those things. And you just want to be prepared for kind of where your responsibility begins and ends with
Yeah,
taking
and
care of the unit.
we've talked about this in other episodes before, but it's okay to say again that the way that the building is taking care of these things is through your monthly condo fees, right? So when you're looking at your condo docs, and one of those condo docs are the building expenditures, and you'll see which of these items that you just said are actually being paid for. So, to go back to the first condo I ever owned, when it was a new build and I was the second of 5 owners, we hadn't established half of this stuff yet. We hadn't established I'm trying to think, like, the pest control. We hadn't established um any of the landscaping, any of the things that we eventually
Mm,
did, we hadn't built those into the plan yet, which means, one, our condo fees did go up, which happens almost always with a new build, unless the planning is so concrete in the beginning for all of these things we just mentioned. But if you add those things in, then the condo fees have to go up. Um, and so
mm,
that's it's important to know. And it's also important to know that if something happens with those items we just listed, the ones that are the responsibility of the building, if there's not enough money in the reserves to cover it, then just like if it was your own house and something completely craps out and you have to replace it, you're going to have to find the money. And when you're in a condo, you're finding the money by a special assessment. So you're taking the thing that needs to be done and you're splitting it up among the unit owners, usually by percentage of the building that they own, and that's how you pay for that
yep.
big fix. So for anybody who's considering a condo, that's one of the reasons why you're looking at the building reserves and the age of the systems and the common areas, or the things that are not your individual responsibility. That's what gives you an educated guess as to how much money will need to be spent. Will you have a special assessment outside of freak accidents and things like that?
Yep. Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. And
So
then the
then,
last thing we had just noted, yeah, and talked about were preparing for the inevitable. And so, what we typically, rule of thumb that we tend to give to owners who we're working with is roughly $2,000 for kind of those minor to semi-major repairs that will come up annually, and maybe 4 to 5K set aside for houses, for items that will come up. That tends to be a question that our homeowners ask us when they're looking for tenants. How much are we going to have to pay per year for maintenance? And so, depending, that's why you want to know the life of your appliances, your hot water heater, your larger systems, your HVAC, so you can really plan. And then it's not the same type of reaction when something does fail. So I know right now my appliances are next on the list, and so that's what I'm saving for.
yeah, and I mean, it's good to know, especially if you're a first time home buyer, or if you've just really, in this market, people are paying more than they sometimes want to. They're paying over asking price, which means they might be digging into their pockets a little bit more than they had wanted to. So, it's, in your case, you said you bought a house and you knew that some of those systems were older and that you'd have to replace them, which is great. But imagine if you went into buying and you really gutted your savings, which I never recommend anyone completely does do that. But if you were to, and then something happens, like you need to deal with it. So it's important to try to get as clear and full a picture as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Um,
So I guess to kind of get towards the end of this episode, so to protect one's investment, kind of what are some kind of bullet points we can give people about how they should
Yeah, I mean,
be
looking
doing this?
at, I think we've touched a lot on the preventative maintenance, which I really, really think is something that everyone should take some time to map out for your home, what your needs are, depending on if you're a house or a condo, and what's important to you. And hopefully, someone can pick up a tip or two from this podcast. But I think if you can map out what your preventative maintenance plan is for your house, have your team in place, and that means when something goes wrong, this is the person that I'm going to call for my handyman needs, or this is a plumber that I trust. Meet people, meet vendors. Don't be scared to get 2 or 3 quotes for something. I think a lot of times people say, well, I'm just going to, I don't have the time, so I'm just going to call the first person that so and so recommended. Ask for a few recommendations, and you might like one person or one company over another, depending on what they say and how they explain things to you. We have a program that I had talked to you about just before signing on, called Birdwatch, which is a subscription for owners. It's $75 a month for the subscription, but we take all of that off your plate as an owner. So if you do find that you're like, I'm too busy, this sounds really overwhelming to look at preventative maintenance, to look at reactive maintenance, then we really enjoy kind of taking that off of owners' plates. So having your team, whether it be a birdwatch that we can help take it off your plate, or other vendors or people that just so that you're ready when something does come up.
Yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I know lots of my clients, I think, who would be interested in Birdwatch or offloading some of this stuff because it's not only the the headache of finding the quotes and stuff, it's just also not really knowing the lingo, not really understanding what's going on, like, it's just if you don't learn it and you didn't learn it and you have no interest in learning it, as you're getting older, sometimes it's just better to hand these things off to somebody who does enjoy it and knows what they're talking about. And in the case of Birdwatch, I think you said you get multiple quotes too, and you can get different quotes and stuff for people, so you can really lead them, in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in some cases, we can use our own our Nest handyman. We have an in-house plumber, and we've obviously been dealing with vendors for over 10 years, and so we know kind of what prices should be, what would be who we would want to go with for certain projects, and then for other things, a roof replacement or something like that, we can get multiple quotes and definitely work with owners to make sure they feel comfortable. But we oversee all of the projects. Owners don't have to be home, so it's nice if you're thinking to yourself, I really don't have time to deal with any of this.
Yeah, I'm gonna send somebody your way, like, literally right after we, hang up this recording. Um, well, anyway, like I said at the beginning of the episode, we are gonna actually put together a list of the items that we said today, and if anybody is interested, they can, ping me. My information's, all over the place in this podcast, but in the show notes everywhere else, or you can go to the website, and we can send it out for them. And of course, if anyone's interested in Birdwatch, they can go to your website and sign up. What's the website?
Birdwatch-dc.com.
There you go. Super easy. So anyway, Steph, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks.